All right. Hello, everybody. So, my name is Sheena, and I am currently the CTO of Umuzi. So, I'm going to talk a lot about what Umuzi does over the course of this presentation, but TLDR, we teach people stuff. We train a lot of BBD employees, even, which is pretty cool. So, what I do there is I build effective, efficient education systems for remote education. And that has a whole bunch of things, it includes a whole lot of things. So, for example, tech, people, syllabus, UX, sleepless nights. I learned to code around 20 years ago, which is bananas. And I've always had a passion for education. And these are my emojis. I'm here to tell you a story. The story starts off in an apartment block far, far away. So that's if you're far from Jeppestown in Johannesburg. So it starts off looking, oh, this thing goes in a funny order. Check that out. All right. So it starts off looking a bit like this. So as you can see, there are a whole lot of people looking quite productive and industrious, and occasionally not very productive or industrious. We have a whole lot of people standing really close together. We have a whole lot of whiteboards and sticky notes, and that's unhygienic. So what you're looking at there is a place called Umuzi. So Umuzi is one of those words that doesn't have a direct English translation. It means home, sort of, and that's our working definition. So Umuzi is a nonprofit training provider. So basically what we were doing is we would find high potential and underemployed youth. So youth is 18 to 35. That's how it works. And the way we'd find them is we would cast quite a wide net and advertise like crazy, and people would apply to our programs. And then we'd take the best applicants and we'd bus them all into Jeppestown. And we'd put them up in accommodation for about a week, and we would put them through their paces and put them through a selection boot camp. By the end of the boot camp, we'd have a bunch of people who we thought, like, these guys are worth investing in. And then we'd invest in them. So we'd hire them, and their job was to learn, which sounds like a damn cool job if you ask me. While they were with us, we'd train them in various high-value digital skills. So that includes stuff like I do all the techie things. So that would be things like web development and data engineering. We do data science, Java, React Native, a few other things. And then we also do some like lower tech things. So copywriting, UI, UX, strategy, stuff like that. So all of our stuff has nationally recognized certification associated with it, which is really nice. But you can't eat your certificates, so we help our alumni get and keep jobs. Kind of want to rebrand to Hotel Umuzi because people don't really leave our system. Like once somebody's gone through our education system, if they get hold of us in like 5 years' time and they're like, hey, I need a job, we'll be like, all right, let's see if we can find an opportunity for you. So we try to look after people for their lives. So we believe in holistic education. This is quite a big deal. We look after the whole person. I think there are mostly techies in the audience here now. And so you know that in order to be successful in this career, it's about a lot more than the technical stuff. So that's what we do. We teach people a lot about teamwork and professionalism, and that's like quite a broad bucket of things. We also supply wellness support. So there's counselors and workshops, and that's available for staff. So it's all really, really wholesome. We even have some financial literacy courses that we give to our learners. So a lot of our learners come from pretty poor backgrounds, or they don't have people in their circles that have financial literacy. And we train them up and get them good jobs with good salaries. And then we don't want them to make stupid mistakes. So we just try and like disarm as many foot guns as possible early on. So everything was going great. And then it wasn't anymore. COVID happened and it was really rough. We needed to change basically everything about how we operated because we were in person, but we needed to stay true to our core. So we didn't want to lose our humanity. So that's all quite a big deal. So we locked down, and I'm sure that everybody here has their own like horrible lockdown experience, and I don't want to diminish that. This is just our horrible experience. We had about 250 learners on site and a bunch of staff as well. So our learners, we had this apartment block, and we basically renovated the bottom floor into studios, and everybody was there all the time, and it was cozy sometimes. It was, yeah, pretty full. And all of our learners were mostly living around Jeppestown in horrible little apartments that we found. So we needed to get everybody home safe. And we couldn't just send them home and be like, let's see you when the pandemic is over. We wanted to continue supporting them. I mean, we had to, because for a lot of folks, this was their only chance. And for a lot of folks, like, if we just sent them home and didn't give them any like extra support, they wouldn't have been able to continue learning. We also couldn't let our funding partners down. So this is quite a big deal. Like, we had, the way we were funded was organizations would pay us ahead of time and say like, cool, we need 20 web devs. And we'd be like, okay. And we would go and we would recruit 20 web dev learners, train them for a year, and then inject them into different organizations. So we had been prepaid to do a job. And so we were going to do that job somehow. So it was a logistical nightmare at first. We had to send everybody home and do it safely. So transporting everybody back into the four corners of South Africa, we had to give them computers to take home with them, just like give everybody a box. Insurance on those computers, medical aid. We had about 250 SIM cards in our MD's name at one point, which is hilarious. Our funding dried up completely. So people had prepaid for learnerships, but nobody was going to buy any new learnerships for a while. Like, every single business was hedging their bets. So we had a drought. I think we had no income for more than a year, and we had to just like make a plan. And then on top of that, most of our junior teammates were leaving. So one of the things that we do is we teach really foundational stuff. So if we're teaching somebody how a for loop or a function works, you don't need some kind of like senior lecturer or senior techie to do that job. Like, a junior person can do that really, really well. You just got to like find a junior with a teacher's heart and teach them a little bit about how to get the lessons across. So we had all these juniors running around doing fantastic work, but they were contracted to someone else. Like, there was an internship going on. And so we had like a little bit of runway where we still had them around, and we needed to make a plan to like do their jobs without them, without hiring any new people remotely. So that's that's the scene. So we sent everyone home, and we needed to make sure that nobody fell through the cracks. We were like, cool, we're going to need to just like find some flex tapes, find some band-aids to just like hold this together while we make a long-term solution. So the first thing we built was this hack. It really helped. So basically what we did was we asked our learners to fill out 3 Google Forms every day. So like in the morning, in the afternoon, and at the end of the day, fill these things out. So in the morning, they'd say things like, today I intend to work on X, and I'm intending, and I think I might struggle with this. And in the afternoon, they could say, I'm on track, I'm not on track, this is why. And in the like end of the day, they can give us a little bit of feedback about how the day went, and are they completely stuck, or are they on track? Are they behind? Are they ahead? And that was really nice. So then we could get a picture of who was filling out the form, who had a lot to say, who had little to say. And this is a smoke detector. It let us like spot certain types of fires so that we can put them out. Totally insufficient as a school mechanism, but certain fires we could spot. So for example, if somebody just wasn't filling out any forms at all, and be like, all right, did they get home safe? Did they, do they have power problems? Do they have network problems? Do they have family problems? Do they have health problems, mental health problems? Are they just being naughty? Sometimes people are just naughty. So this let us deal with that, which is great, but totally insufficient. So we needed to still, of course, allow our learners to hand in projects. We needed to be able to track their competencies and progress over time. We needed to be compliant with our NQF assessors. So earlier on, I mentioned that we have nationally recognized certification, and that means that we get audited externally. So we needed something that like those guys would look at and be like, okay, it's legit. And other obvious school stuff, because we're effectively a school. So did we need an LMS? So there are pieces of software out there that exist for this exact purpose, for like running schools, and these are called learner management systems. And there's a lot of really nice ones. There's open source ones, there's closed source fancy things, like there's a bunch to choose from. And they typically have a bunch of features at their core. So for example, allows you to set up curriculums by filling in a bunch of forms. So like rich text forms and WYSIWYG forms and that kind of thing. But we're like, yeah, we don't need that actually. We already had a curriculum. So we were using this thing called Hugo, which is a static site generator. So we basically had a whole lot of markdown files and some YAML, and that got turned into HTML, and that's what our learners interacted with as a syllabus. So we're like, let's not lose that because Git is cool. Like if we had to use this WYSIWYG thing, we'd have to like port everything over, or like maybe use some APIs to get everything in there. So it's just like, damn, that sounds like quite a headache, and that's a core feature. All right, what else do these things do? They keep your content super secret, so people can only access what they're allowed to access at certain times. But like, we're open source. All of our stuff is for free, so we don't need that either. We have all sorts of fancy pants reporting. That's nice. This is quite a broad bucket of things. So of course, observability is critical. Like we want to be able to keep track of where people are in the process, and we need to also report to our partners, like our funding partners, like how their cohorts are moving through the system, how they're doing. But like education comes first, reporting comes second. If we're not doing a good job of educating people, then like what, like what are we even doing? So, like, all right, cool. So what do we actually need? We need to reduce our dependency on staff like immediately. So that's a huge deal. So that means we need peer-to-peer learning and education, and we need as much automation as we can muster. We need to also simulate a real work environment as much as possible. So the second point is like maybe not that obvious. We take noobs and we turn them into professionals. That's our thing. So in order to do that, we take the noob and we treat them like a professional, and we have professional expectations, and we hold them to a really high standard from day one. So making somebody interact with something that's effectively a clever textbook, that does not resemble real life at all. So yeah, like not to bash textbooks. Textbooks are great. I've benefited from like old school textbooks made out of dead trees, but like we wanted something a bit more realistic. We also wanted to treat tech education as a first-class citizen. So we teach all sorts of different kinds of people, and some of them aren't coders, and that's okay. But there isn't really an LMS that is developed for tech education. Most of our students are techies. There's just like quite a demand. So like some of them would have a plugin that does some GitHub stuff, but it's clearly an afterthought and pretty limited. And like maybe even the fancy pants reporting doesn't even plug in properly. So it wasn't ideal in so many different ways. The next thing is that we wanted to support self-paced learning because it's just human-centered. Like if you consider a standard classroom situation, a bunch of people with their bums in chairs and the teacher standing in the front telling them stuff, you'll get a bunch of learners who move at the average pace and they're quite comfortable. Then you'll get a bunch of learners who are on the fast end of the spectrum. And they tend to, like, what do? They get bored. They pursue other things. They get into trouble. They're basically underutilized. We could stretch them a little bit more. Then you get people on the slow side of the spectrum. And, you know, they're people too, and they're having a rough time. They are trying desperately to keep up, falling further and further behind. They are put into desperate situations, and those desperate situations encourage them to do desperate things. And then they get blamed for doing desperate things. It's just like, it's just not good for people to make everybody go at the same pace. And if you introduce the chaos of a remote work situation with the whole pandemic going on, the bell curve there, it flattens out. So we definitely needed that. And we wanted to maintain our superpowers. So we're very innovative in how we teach code. If teaching code was easy, the world would be quite a different place, but it's not. So it's like, all right, we don't want to lose our powers, and we don't want to limit future innovation either. So like just getting an off-the-shelf product and just like coloring within those lines didn't make any sense. So like, all right, sweet. So we're going to build something. Fantastic. What are we going to build? Shit. So the thing we built had two main things at its core. The first thing is that our syllabus is code already. And the second thing is that Kanban is a whole thing. So let's use that. So here is a picture of our syllabus, or a couple of the syllabus files. So on the left there, you can see that, so yeah, we've got two files. We've got a bunch of markdown at the bottom, and at the top, we've got a bunch of YAML. So these are things that Hugo understands, but Hugo's got a certain amount of front matter that it requires. We beefed that up quite a lot. So we were like, okay, let's use the front matter in order to define like how this piece of syllabus behaves on a Kanban board. So you could do things like say, this is a project, it needs to be done in Python, and it's got certain prerequisites. This project over here can be done in JavaScript, TypeScript, or any of the front-end frameworks that we support. And it's got some other prerequisites. And if you do this thing in TypeScript, then you must do those things in TypeScript. And then you could take that syllabus and we could ingest it into a program that thought of it as a directed graph. From that, we could design a specific curriculum. So we could say, cool, for web dev part 1, you need to hit these specific nodes in order, which means you need to hit those specific nodes in order, which means you get a backlog. So from this, we could let our learners choose which order they wanted to do things in within reason. So they can start with the 4th task in the backlog if they want to. But strangely enough, not the 3rd, because it's got a prerequisite that's not met. So they've got some freedom and they can think about how tasks are related to each other. So now we knew what we wanted to build. The next thing is like, what are we going to use to build it? So we needed to build it really, really fast. Like there was 0 capacity. And we needed to support lots of learners immediately. So we actually went live the day that our junior team left. So there was literally no frontline support when we went live. We like turned it on, like, it worked. So that was terrifying. But it's like we couldn't have any rough edges, any bugs, anything that would confuse people, because then we'd have like 250 confused people, and that would be terrible. Of course, we wanted to make use of modern front-end technologies. And another consideration always is, what will our future team look like? So yeah, you always want to choose something that you can onboard people onto. Our future team would be often made up of like junior people again. So the thought was that going forward, we would get to a point where we could hire more junior techies and get them to run around and help and teach people and stuff. They could help with this too. So we needed a stack that wasn't like a crazy learning curve as well. Yeah, so we ended up with this. So we used Django. So basically Django treated the Hugo site as configuration, and then we exposed Django's stuff via Django REST framework, and had a front end built in React. So Django. Show of hands, who's heard of Django? Yeah, so a lot of people have heard of it. Who's used it? Okay, there's like one person. Yeah, that's not actually that surprising. It's like, it's not fashionable at all, but everyone's heard of it because it's legit. It's been around for a long time. It's a bit of a workhorse. So it's a framework for perfectionists with deadlines. That's me. And it comes with a lot of batteries included, which is really cool. So it's cool in one way and restrictive in another. Like a lot of decisions have been made for you by the framework. It's very opinionated. And you can like take some of those opinions out and be like, I don't want that battery, I want this other thing. Like you can kind of rewire it. But it's cool that the opinions that are embedded in the framework are the opinions of like some really clever people. So you've got something that out of the box just works freaking well. And the other thing that's really nice about it is that like, if you hire a Django developer to work on your Django project, they'll be productive nearly immediately because Django projects look the same. So that was cool. One thing that's potentially controversial is that Django is built around this ORM. And a lot of people are like, oh, ORMs are dirty. They definitely have their downsides, but they definitely have their uses as well. And I think Django is a great illustration of just like how much power you can get out of an ORM. So the way it works is that you define these tables in Django. So you'll be like, cool, I have this table, it's got these columns with these restrictions. And then you could define different things built on top of that. So you can say something like, cool, I want a form that exposes these columns, and I want an API that exposes those columns. And it's like mostly configuration rather than writing code, which is great because it just doesn't have a lot of footnotes. Oops. So that's weird. So we built this thing called tilde. So yes, tilde is that weird curly thing just underneath your escape key. So how did we get the name tilde? Well, tilde means home, sort of. Yeah. So while we were building this thing out, we had to be super, super lean, laser focused on users. We had no space for scope creep. So the first and most important user is the learner. So the learner gets a Kanban board. So when the learner logs in for the first time, they just have like a backlog that's full of stuff, and their job is to move that stuff into the complete column, and that's their life for a while. Um, so we have different cards that behave in different ways, or different types of cards, and of course the card's behavior is configured in the YAML front matter of the Hugo content. So we've got two major types of cards. So there's topics and there's projects. So with the topic, it's self-study. So a learner will say like, cool, I want to read this thing, and they'll move it into progress, and be like, cool, I'm busy reading this thing. And then when they're finished, they'll just move it into the complete column themselves, and they'll be like, I'm finished reading this thing, which is great. The next important thing is a project card. So projects are really where the magic happens. That's where people actually get to demonstrate their skills. So in that case, then we'll start it. And then when they think they're like nailed it, they'll move it into review. And then they can get feedback, and it can go back into review feedback. And then they can ask for another review, and it can bounce back and forth a few times until they've mastered all of the concepts within that project. So that's cool. Like we won't say, okay, cool, you've run out of time to move on. You got 70%. It's like, no, master the stuff and then move on to the next stuff. And then eventually things would move into complete. So that's quite cool. Now there's lots of different types of project cards as well. So I'm going to talk about my favorite one, the repo project card. We use this one like the most in the technical syllabuses. So the card starts off in the backlog like every other card, and the learner chooses to start it. In the back end, a whole bunch of stuff happens. So we create a repo for them on GitHub. We protect the main branch because you can't go pushing to the main branch willy-nilly. That's not how things work. Then we add the learner as well as reviewers as collaborators onto that repo. And then the learner has to make pull requests, and those pull requests get reviewed by their peers. So that's quite nice. So there's all sorts of benefits to peer review on projects. For the one, on the one hand, it just saves a lot of time for staff. We don't necessarily need to point out all the little lessons people can share with each other, which is cool. But beyond that, we do a whole lot more. So we only add a learner as a reviewer on a project if they've already completed that project. So they've already demonstrated competence. Then they get a bunch of benefits out of that, like spaced repetition. So if you're learning how to do something, or like learning a new thing, you want to visit the content, and then a while later you want to come back and visit it again, and then it's a little bit stickier in your head. So that's a clear benefit. And then also the learner who's reviewing the code, they get to see different ways of solving the same problem. So that's pretty cool. And then they learn a whole lot about professional communication. Code review is a fact of life, so they get used to that quite early on. The next thing that's quite cool is just like zooming into the review and feedback columns. So once a learner asks for a review, then their peers review it, but we've also got staff members who play a role. So first of all, like any person who's reviewing a project can move it back into review feedback and say like, your tests didn't really test anything, or there's a bug, or your code is unclean, or whatever they need to say. So anyone can move it back. At some point, it'll get to a point where all of the peers are like, this is good work, we approve. We can like, yeah, we approve basically. And then a staff member or some kind of trusted reviewer will step in and say like, do I agree or not? So not just anyone can move a card from review to complete, only trusted people can. Because when the learners start reviewing things, they're noobs, they don't know what competent looks like, or maybe they're just like not yet professional about it. So we'll always have like an extra check at the end. And all sorts of interesting things can come just by watching that. So you pay attention to how different cards bounce back and forward between review and review feedback, and that gives us hints about how we can support our learners. So, for example, if lots of learners approve on one card and a trusted reviewer doesn't, then it means that there's a knowledge gap to be plugged. So it means that the person who wrote the code and everybody who reviewed the code, like they missed something somehow. So we can swoop in and deal with that. Then if a specific learner has a card that's just extra bouncy, then they need support. So what we do is we give people just-in-time support. We don't force everybody to sit through the same lesson. we say like, okay, cool, you guys there, you managed to teach this lesson to yourselves. Just keep on trucking, like be your best selves. And then we'll find the people who are struggling and be like, all right, cool, we'll have a small workshop with just you three who are struggling with this thing and one staff member. And it'll be small and focused and interactive, and we'll get that knowledge across to you. So it lets us do that, which is very, very powerful. Then if a specific project always leads to extra bouncy cards, then it means that there's something wrong with the project. It means that maybe it's too complicated, or it's missing some prerequisites, or it's just stated in a confusing way. So we can spot problems in our syllabus and solve that. If there's a specific reviewer that's always involved in bounty cards, then it probably means that there's some kind of anti-pattern at play, like maybe they're giving incomplete feedback, or maybe they just say things in a confusing way. So we can also intervene there. That usually needs a bit more investigation. Then if there's a learner who's just like always bouncier than the others, it's like, okay, cool, like this person just generally needs more support, and that's okay. The next group of users that we care about are the on-the-ground staff. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but we did need some degree of observability just to see how people are tracking in relation to each other. Like, even though things are self-paced, we do have a minimum pace that people need to move at. So we could do all sorts of cool things with burn down charts and stuff like that. Next group of users are the admin users. So the one person who's done Django before will recognize this as the admin panel that comes with Django. So one of the batteries that's included with Django is this thing. And it's really cool because like building out an administrative panel is a pain in the neck and very tedious and very repetitive. With Django, it is basically configuration. So the users who would benefit from this would be the guys like who manage things on a higher level. So for example, if I wanted to say, cool, Tepo is doing a web development course and Hloni is doing a data science course, I'd configure it in here. So we need something for those users. Now, this is the code for that page. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but just look at it for a moment. It's not code, it's data structures. It's just configuration. And so it's really, really easy to put together. And it's like you can't really go wrong. So that made building out this kind of like tedious front end like very, very quick and cheap. So that was cool. Next group of users are the devs. So Django REST framework is a thing that plugs on top of Django's models, and it allows the same kind of configuration as the admin panel does. So it's also very, very easy to write. And it comes with this cool browsable front end. And this code looks a bit like that. Very, very easy to write, primarily configuration. So that was cool. And that was successful. So our learners did fine, which is great. Like we turned the thing on and it worked. It had some rough edges and we're still learning a bunch of stuff, but it worked. So a fun fact is that there's a speaker at this conference. She's actually talking right now. I was going to embarrass her, but now I can't. Damn. But Pindi, she was a learner at Umuzi, and she arrived like a week before lockdown. So she got there and she was like, hi, we're like, go home. And now she works for BVD and she's speaking at the same conference. And that's like damn cool. So I can also say that we are way better than we were when we were on-prem, like loads better. We have much better observability. We have much better ways of detecting who's in trouble in different ways. And like people don't get lost in the noise as easily. You would think that it's easier to teach people when you can go and look over their shoulder, but like this is actually pretty solid. We also have our learners taking part in our selection bootcamps on their cell phones. So Tilda is like remote friendly, and we run our selection bootcamps via Tilda now. So back in the day, we used to have to bus everybody into Jeppestown, and it was this big expensive thing. And like the applicants would chicken out. They'd be like, oh, I heard about you on the internet, but I'm not getting on that bus. What's going to happen to me? So it de-risks it in a lot of ways for all parties involved. So people can prove that they are worth investing in while sitting under a tree and coding with their thumbs. So that's fantastic. We are also able to remotely teach learners across Africa. So one of our staff members at the moment is a young data scientist from Nigeria, and she's great. She came through our data science program. She just like smashed our course from Nigeria, and I've never seen her in 3 dimensions. So I think I'm going to meet her next year, which is going to be pretty cool. And that's fantastic. So yeah. So that's all been really great. So Umuzi as a whole has leveled up drastically. The fact that we managed to transition to remote so effectively was something that really leveled us up in a lot of different ways, that opened up a lot of other opportunities. So our mission, it's not completely like based around Tilda or anything. It was just, that was the start of our journey. But we have partnered with all sorts of people across Africa and all sorts of other kinds of education providers across Africa. And now we get to aim a little bit higher. We're not about reducing social inequality and the people that we can bus into Jeppestown. We are about reducing social inequality in Africa through digital education. That is it.